in a new volume. This volume 49, 49A actually. This special volume, and there are 3 parts, A, B, C. It's quite a long, quite a thick volume on the life of the Buddha. These 3 volumes are important in the sense that we put together the key teachings, the key suttas regarding the life of the Buddha, and they make very interesting reading about the Buddha as history and also the Buddha as mythology, past Buddhas and so on. Today we will look through, by way of a summary, the Maha Sihanada Sutta, M12. Maha Sihanada, the Greater Lion Roar Sutta. This is an overview of the Buddha's special qualities. When we say the word Sihanada, it means a kind of a public witnessing, a declaration of faith in public, something that is true, something unique of the Buddha's teaching. Usually such a declaration is made by the Buddha or an Arhat. In other cases, the word thunder would be used, right? But when we say lion roar, because the lion, as you know, is the king of the beasts, so the idea is to evoke this majesty of the lion as the king of the beasts. When the lion roars, all the other animals kind of will fear hearing this deep, resonant roar of the lion. You only need to go to the zoo to hear this really deep sound. So in the case of the Buddha's teaching, the roar here means the truth of the teaching is so real, especially the teaching of impermanence, that even the gods themselves are terrified of the truth, knowing that even their conditions, as long as it may be, is going to be impermanent. So that's the lion roar. Now this sutta is a late sutta. It's a very long sutta. I'm only giving a summary, the key points. You can read out the sutta in your own time. It was given by the Buddha when he was 80 years old. So we know this very well, as mentioned in the sutta itself. I will point out as we go along. The occasion of this sutta is one of the young monks, the young Lichavi, who challenged the Buddha to perform some miracles to show that he is a true teacher and the Dhamma is a true teaching and so on. And the Buddha, of course, refused to make such a public show of miracles. The idea of this monk is the Buddha would perform such miracles, he would have more converts, and also to show that he is a great teacher. So he's not very happy, and he goes around disparaging the Buddha. Okay, so that is the beginning, right? So let me just start off the reflection by reading to you the introduction. Thus have I heard, at one time the Blessed One was staying in the thick woods outside the city of Vesali, to the west. Now at that time, the young Lichavi Sunakata had recently left this Dhamma Vinaya. So in other words, he has given up the rope, and he's not happy with the Buddha, so he resigned as a monk, and then he went around actually saying bad things about the Buddha. He said the Buddha does not have any superhuman powers, he's not awakened, his knowledge is purely something intellectual, something reasoned out, hammered out through reasoning, and all he teaches is just about suffering and the ending of suffering. That's all. So his idea is that to show that the Buddha's teaching is very negative. And then in the next section 3, Sariputta goes into the city to collect alms, and he sees this gathering, and Sunakata was there talking bad about the Buddha in the same way.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
You said the Buddha was 80 years old, and then Sariputta was still around?
Yes. But I'm just interpreting the sutta. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So Sariputta, of course, apparently passed away when the Buddha probably was 80, I think. So that those we need to check carefully the chronology. The dates are not very exact in the sutras, so we can kind of safely say in this case, if the Buddha says it's 80, probably Sariputta has just still alive, but kind of is going to pass away soon, possibly. So that's one way to understand it. Of course, there is a possibility that the way the sutta is compiled could be the kind of put the chronology kind of wrong. Maybe it's the monk who has gone out to collect alms round. So these are things which can be investigated in due course, because it's a very long sutta. So once you have a long sutta like this, it's likely to be compiled over some time. So we'll just interpret the sutta as it is. So Sariputta goes out, and then comes back and reports to Buddha and say, well, he hears this young Licchavi Sunakata making the same disparagement. Now the Buddha replies, he says, Sariputta, this Sunakata is a hollow man who is angry. For these are the words of one who is angry. Then he says that such a person who is angry will not be is creating bad karma, basically. In fact, what he's saying to the crowd, he doesn't realize is part of it is true, and he's actually showing that the Buddha is right. The part where Sunakata says that the Buddha teaches only suffering and the ending of suffering. So here, although this is something right and true, he's not aware of it. So he uses that as an accusation of the Buddha. So in other words, here we see an example where there are cases where certain people are not awakened and they're not happy with the Buddha, and they spoke against him even publicly. So that must have been the original situation. And what the sutta compilers did was they put together a series of teachings. Of course, all this had been spoken by the Buddha at some point. Now, the Buddha spoke for 45 years, and these various sections of teachings have been spoken by the Buddha at different times during the 45 years, more than once, obviously. There are sections, for example, which also appear in the Maha Sutta, right? So I'll mention all these as we go along. So the Buddha now begins by listing out his abilities, his knowledge, his powers, and so on, to disprove that whatever Sunakata is saying is wrong. Sunakata is saying here, the Buddha is not awakened, he has no wisdom, he has no powers, and all he does is just teach about suffering and ending of suffering. So in this long sutta, the Buddha shows that, except for the last statement, Sunakata's charges are false and malicious. So in the very first part of the teaching, the Buddha's reply, he talks about his three powers. The basic power of the Buddha, if you like. But these three powers are not the famous three powers, the last one of which is awakening. These are the first three of the various, for example, like the 6 powers of the Buddha. So there are many sets of powers. Later on we'll see there are the 10 powers, for example. So you see here a very developed sutta, in other words. So let's look at firstly the 3 powers of the Buddha. First of all, of course, the Buddha claims, he says, well, I have this manifold psychic powers, idivida. Okay? So, for example, able to appear, disappear, multiply himself. And the second power is that of the divine ear element. It's able to hear sounds which are far away. It's able to hear the conversation of the gods and so on. And it's able to hear, for example, Daniya singing joyfully about his wealth and happiness very far away on the Mahi river, and he's in Savatthi. And then he responds to that singing by Daniya and teaches him the Dharma. And then thirdly is the ability of mind reading. The Buddha is able to, in other words, kind of mind meld or something like that. He's able to know the mental state of the student or the meditator and help him accordingly. These are the 3 powers. And then section 9 onwards are the famous 10 powers of the Buddha, the Dasabala. So here, these 10 powers are, number 1, the Buddha says here, Sariputta, the Tathagata understands as it really is what is possible to be possible, what is impossible to be impossible. In other words, the Buddha does not talk about things which are beyond reality, which cannot really happen, which are imaginative and so on. Right? So what the Buddha is saying, his teachings talk about things which are possible. It's possible for things to happen. It's not something purely imaginative. Number 2 is the Buddha says, furthermore, Sariputta, the Tathagata understands according to true reality the creation of karma, past, present and future, both in terms of cause and effect. Because here this is a very basic Buddhist teaching. The Buddha understands nature of karma through his past ability to recall past lives. He understands nature of karma, past, present, future, and also conditionality, how karma works, cause and effect. Then in power number 3 is able, in summary, is able to more or less, from the understanding of karma, is able to tell, okay, this person, what is his destiny, where will he be reborn, what kind of rebirth will occur to him. So in other words, this is to show that karma works, and that doing good is worthwhile and doing bad is not worthwhile. It's going to bring bad results. Then number 4, he knows the numerous and different elements of the world. He understands the nature of the universe, if you like. And number 5 is he knows the various disposition of beings, the different ways that beings behave, conduct themselves, the nature of the various kinds of beings. And then number 6, he understands the faculties here and beyond of other beings, other individuals. The faculties means the abilities, how they function psychologically. And then number 7, furthermore, Sariputta, the Tathagata understands the defilement, the cleansing, the emergence regarding the attainments, the liberations, the samadhis, and the dhyanas. This is about meditation, in other words. So you can see a kind of a gradual deepening of understanding. The Buddha understands the nature of the mind in meditation, how the mind builds up gradually to attain jhana. Number Bala or power number 8 is the knowledge of the Buddha's past lives given in full. It's able to recall past lives of many hundreds of thousands of past births. And then power number 9 is the divine ear. So here you see a repetition. Is able to, sorry, this is a divine eye, not divine ear. Divine eye, in other words, is able to see how karma works for the beings, how these beings arise and pass away according to the karma. Now at this point, there is what is called the hell refrain. So this apparently is the only place in the suttas that I know where a sort of warning is given. Basically, if someone were to say bad things about the Buddha in this way, he will be reborn in a hell state. But we should not take it just like that, because the phrasing here is very important. Because it's not the Buddha who is saying, I will send you to hell. It's not saying that. Rather, it's the karma of this person. Let's look at the passage. These beings who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech and mind, who reviled the noble ones, hold wrong views and undertook actions under the influence of wrong views, with their bodies breaking up after death, have appeared in a state of misery, a bad destination, a lower realm in hell. So notice he's saying that anyone who, with a bad intention, bad karma, attacks the saints, not just the Buddha, in fact the Buddha is not mentioned here, but it's included under the word noble ones. Because of that negative state of mind, would be reborn in the hell states. It's understandable here because of the habitual negative mind of this kind of person. So then the next section, section 22, the Buddha talks about what are called the 4 intrepidities. In Pali is the Vesaraja Yana. Now these 4 are sort of guarantees, if you like, sureties. In other words, number 1, when the Buddha claims that he is fully awakened, he is telling the truth, that is the case. It is, no one can prove this otherwise, that he is the fully awakened one. So it's wrong to say that the Buddha still needs to become a bodhisattva or still has to awaken. So this is the first intrepidity. Then number 2, the Buddha declares that he has overcome all the mental defilements, all the mental influxes, and this is the case. Number 3, those things called obstructions really work to obstruct our spiritual progress. In other words, there are certain things, for example, the monks, if they break the rule of celibacy, for example, it is an obstruction. If they believe in a kind of eternal self, like a soul, that also is an obstruction. In fact, we have 2 suttas in this connection. In the first sutta, we have this person, Arita, who claims that it's okay for monks to have sex. The Buddha said it's totally wrong. And in the second case, there is this monk called Sati who says that it's the same consciousness, the same soul that moves life after life. The Buddha says that's wrong too. And so this kind of views are obstructions. So in other words, when the Buddha teaches this kind of truth, they are factual. We cannot deny these things. And the last one, number 4, the teaching of the Dharma taught by the Buddha, if we practice it properly, will definitely bring the end of suffering. So in a sense, you might say these 4 intrepidities is the closest that early Buddhism ever come to what in religions conceive as dogmas, if you like. But even then, it's not something you are forced to believe in. That's the difference. Here, they're more like, these are the 4 guarantees that the Buddha has in terms of a teacher. Now, in the next section, we have something very familiar. As I said, it is also found in the Maha Sutta, and this is the teaching on the 8 assemblies. First, the Buddha says there are these 8 assemblies: the assemblies of the Kshatriyas, the nobles, the assembly or the company of the Brahmins or the priest class, the company of the house lords. These are the people with landed property, of the recluses. These are the renunciants, the holy men, of the 4 great divine kings. These are the 4 heavenly gods, of the gods of the 33, the company of Mara and the company of Brahma. So you have basically 2 groups here, 4 humans, 4 divine. And the Buddha says that he is able to appear to any of this, in the midst of any of this assembly, and those gathered would not even know that it is the Buddha, that they think that he is one of them. They accept him as one of them because the way he speaks, and apparently from what we are to understand, he appears just like them. The significance of this teaching, I think, is to tell us that the Buddha is able to speak the language of the different classes of beings, not just people, not just socially, but also existentially, even with the gods, for example. So this is a very important quality in a teacher. He's able to adjust his language, and he's kind of confident before any kind of audience. In the next section onwards, we see the sutta talking about the different kinds of knowledges which the Buddha has. And we don't see this kind of listing so commonly elsewhere. It's very rare. For example, here in section 32, the Buddha tells Sariputta that there are these 4 kinds of birth: the egg-born, the womb-born, the moisture-born, and of those of spontaneous birth. So this is to show, almost if you like, in modern terms, the Buddha has some kind of scientific understanding. He knows how beings are born, and there are 4 ways. The egg-born, of course, are the birds, reptiles. The womb-born are humans are in the womb-born. The moisture-born are more like bacteria or worms and so on. Of course, in those days they don't have the concept of bacteria, but in modern terms we would include bacteria in its kind of beings that arise in filth. Now, spontaneous born are the last category. In other words, these are the gods who arise spontaneously when the karma ripen in the heavens and so on. And then in the same spirit, in the next section, section 35, the Buddha talks about the 5 destinies. So here are actual realms. These are the 5 realms. Notice in early Buddhism, there are no 6 realms, there's only 5 realms. The first are the hell, Niraya, then the animal womb, Tirachana Yoni, the realm of the departed, Peti Visaya, the humans, Manusa, and the gods, Devas. So these are the five realms in samsara, where we are caught in a kind of snake and ladder situation, being reborn in one place or the other, up and down this samsara we go. But there is a sixth here. The sixth is nirvana. It is the way out of the five realms. Then the sutta describes in some detail the nature of these realms with a parable each. Here again, I'm just summarizing all these things. In the case of the hells, of course, it's full of suffering, and the parable here is that of a fiery, cold pit. So this is if you like, the imagery of suffering. And then the animal womb, the animal birth, the parable is that of a cesspool, a place of filth. So animals are caught up in this kind of life. And then there is the departed, the pretas. And the preta. Now, this situation is described in this way. Suppose, Sariputta, there were a tree growing on uneven ground with scanty foliage casting a dapple shadow. So here the ground is uneven, very difficult to walk on, and there's no food, and there's no plants that can be grown, that can be taken for food. And the sun is shining very hard, and this tree has got very little leaves, so you can imagine how difficult it is to live in such a place. So here we see this one kind of suffering of the pretas. They're living in this very difficult kind of situation, very uncomfortable, where food is scarce, and so on. So it's not a very pleasant place to live. Of course, here we have to understand all this description is symbolism of discomfort, of suffering, of hunger, and so on. And comes the humans. Now, the humans, what is the parable here? What is the imagery? It is, and the human state is described in the parable of the tree on even ground. This is in section 40.2. So here it is said, suppose, Sariputta, there were a tree growing on even ground with thick foliage casting a deep shadow. Right? So here we have this ground is even, so it can be plowed, you can grow things there, and this tree is very leafy, and the shadow is very cooling, and it's a very comfortable place to stay under. So here we see humans, in other words, are able to grow their own food, they're able to support themselves, and they can also live in comfort. The shadow under the tree represents the kind of comfort. Number 5 is the heavenly world, and the imagery here is that of a mansion's upper chamber. It's a very comfortable room with furniture, with couches and beds, and the place is well lit, the windows with shutters and so on. So in other words, a very comfortable kind of living. So notice here the asuras are not mentioned. Okay? So these are the 5 realms. And number 6, this is the missing third knowledge, is the destruction of mental influxes. And this is what makes the person an arahant, totally free from suffering. And here we have the parable of a clear lotus pond. This is a very delightful imagery in early Buddhism. Not only you have a lotus pond, but the water is very clear. So in other words, this person on a hot day, and he is all very dry and tired and thirsty, he goes into this pond, is able to wash himself, and is able to drink the clean water and cool himself. And then, after each of these kind of summary of this listing of the teachings, the hell refrain is given as a kind of warning that we should not simply disparage the Buddha, or the Arahats for that matter. Now in the next section, section 44, the Buddha kind of goes back in time, talks about the Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be. So here he's talking about how he went through all the different austerities, the different self-mortifications that he practiced. Here is to show that even as a Bodhisattva, he tried all kinds of methods that were used in those days. He tried all of them and he found them not to work. The idea here is that the people might accuse the Buddha and say, "Oh, you did not try this method, it's so difficult, that's why you didn't try it." So here you have a very comprehensive picture. So number one, he has tried the tapasi. He's a tapasi, he's an ascetic. He's tried all those difficult, strict rules. Okay, so this is the first level of difficulty, if you like. And then he has also done what are called the coarse practices, lukha, living in very difficult conditions, wearing kind of rough clothing and so on. And then number three, he also practices the scrupulous practice, the jigucha, jiguchi, or jigucha is the practice, jiguchi is the practitioner. Very scrupulous, in other words, very strict rules. For example, you eat just one, you follow the kind of the lunar days, and on the 15th you will take 15 beans, for example, and as the days become shorter, be 14, 13, 12 until the first day, it just takes only one bean a day. So he follows that kind of ritualistic, difficult life. And in fact, what's interesting in this section, there are lots of details about the various difficulties that he went through, so we have a very clear picture of his self-mortification. For example, in the very first case as an ascetic, he was a naked ascetic. So he followed all the traditional practices of the ascetics of those days. And number four, he also practiced seclusion, pavivita. He lived all alone by himself, and he avoided any kind of company. Even if he's a single person in the forest, he would just flee and go to some secret place where no one would see him. So he has tried all these different levels of difficulties of the ascetic life. And here, then the next part is how he abides in equanimity, section 50. In other words, here he remains very calm, untroubled even in the most severe weather. When the sun is shining very hot, he is there in the open, even in the hot sun, meditating, not complaining at all. Of course, he's suffering. And on a cold winter nights, on the 8th day, which is very cold, he stays in the open again with the same kind of clothing. So there's a poem here. He describes how this is like. Now chill, now scorched, alone in a fearful forest, naked, without a fire to sit by, the silent sage is intent upon his quest. So here, the occasion where he's not wearing anything at all, he's able to go into meditation. Of course, no ordinary person can do this. You must have some level of meditation. Even today we hear of yogis doing something like this. So this is a very ancient tradition, in other words. But the Buddha's point is that all these methods do not bring awakening, and is something we can practice as lay people. And he has lived in the charnel ground and so on. And then section 52, he talks about different kinds of purification through food. Here he followed the rules of diet. For example, he follows what is called the jujube fruit. He only takes the jujube fruit and he just eats just a little bit of it until it becomes very thin, very emaciated. We have this famous sculpture of him from Afghanistan. And then he also went through the bean cycle. He only took beans, a few beans, until to the height of the practice. Just take a single bean a day. So he became so thin, his ribs could be seen, his stomach kind of sunk in, his eyes sunk in, and so on. And then the sesame cycle, he only took a single sesame seed. And then the rice cycle, so again here he just took rice, a single grain. He took a bit at first and then less and less and so on. So this is a really difficult practice of the ascetic yogis. Then in section 57 he relates something more advanced. It goes even further back now, past lives. Remember, as a Bodhisattva, he kind of made his declaration, his desire to be Buddha in the time of the Buddha Dipankara. So here, through different lives, he's saying that he has been reborn in all the realms. So, of course, here, if he has declared himself to be a Buddha, I suppose that he would be reborn only in the human realm and the higher realms. But of course, before that, we may understand he was also reborn in other lower suffering states. So he has been reborn in all the heavens as different kinds of different human classes, except the pure abodes. Now this is again understandable because only non-returners are reborn in the pure abodes. So here again we see another comprehensiveness. The Buddha is saying he knows all these different rebirths through his own experience, in other words. And then he comes back to something more familiar, the purification through rituals, here especially the Brahmanical practices. He has made all the various sacrifices that the Brahmins have done, the fire sacrifice especially, and fire worship and so on. He's done all that, and so he knows what it's all about. Then he relates how he renounces the world. Section 62. As a young man, still black-haired, young man in the prime of life, he leaves home. And this is where in section 62 he tells Sariputta, but Sariputta, you should not think that I'm now old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, and come to the last stage. My years have turned 80. So he's telling Sariputta, okay, I'm 80 now, but don't mistake it that my mind is feeble now. My mind is very clear, the Buddha's mind is very clear, and his memory is good. In fact, to be exact, it says perfect in mindfulness, in assimilative memory, in retentive memory, and in lucidity of wisdom. So what the Buddha is saying, throughout his life as the Buddha, his mind is clear. Even at 80, in his last year of life, he says that he's able, if someone asks him about the 4 satipatthanas, for example, about the 4 focuses of mindfulness, he's able to answer the questions for as long as the person like to listen, in other words. So his mind is very clear, he's able to teach, he's able to answer clearly. In fact, he goes on to say, even if he were to go on talking for 100 years, he's able to do that. So here we see, in other words, a Dhamma teacher would understand what's meant by this kind of statement. It's a little hyperbolic here, a very natural and quite common in Indian literature, to show that the Dhamma teacher is able to go on talking a lot about the Dhamma because he's joyful of it. He knows it and is able to put together lots of common things. For for the benefit of the questioner and the student. So that comes to the end of his list of. This is like a vademecum, if you like. It's like a curriculum vitae, kind of a list of all his qualifications. So he finishes. Now comes the conclusion. Section 64. Now at that time, the Venerable Nagasamana was standing behind the Blessed One, fanning him. Then he said to the Blessed One, "It is wonderful, Bhante, it is wonderful, Bhante. As I listen to this Dharma exposition, body has stood on end. Bhante, what is the name of this exposition?" So here again we see this sutta is given a name. And Nagasamana says that when he hears all these stories, he has this what's called horripilation. Loma hansana pariya. So the loma hansa, in other words. So here the Buddha says, in that case, Nagasamana, you can remember this Dhamma teaching as the hair-raising exposition. Loma hansana pariyaya. The Blessed One said this. The elder Nagasamana joyfully approved of the Blessed One's word. So there you are. That's the sutta. All these important qualities of the Buddha put together in one text. You can conveniently study the nature of Buddhahood, if you like. So in a sense, this sutta is also a kind of a collection of all the important teachings that form the basis of later Buddhology. So we end the sutta here. Let's do a short reflection. When we hear stories of the Buddha, our task is to reflect on the nature of Buddhahood. And the key idea behind Buddhahood, of course, is awakening. The Buddha, through his own effort, realizes the truth and frees himself in that way. And at the same time, he has various kinds of understanding and wisdom. And with such wisdom, there also comes great compassion. Reflecting in this way is very wholesome karma. By the power of such karma, let us send out our loving kindness to ourselves, to our loved ones, to those who have been kind to us, and also those who are practicing the Dharma. May they be well, may they be happy, may they find awakening in this life itself. By the same token, let us also send out our loving kindness to our loved ones, to those who are practicing the Dharma even now, wherever they are struggling for awakening. May they be well, may they be happy, and find the answer in this life itself. And finally, to those who have difficulties in any way regarding the Dharma, may they too find awakening in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.